Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Alfonso Peluso and I'm a Studio Associate Professor in the College of Architecture at IIT, the home of the legendary Mies van der Rohe, and I'm an adjunct professor at Columbia College here in Chicago in the Interior Architecture program. Shout out to all my students. I hope everyone is doing well today. I'm doing great. Today we're going to look at V-Ray for Rhino lighting, some lighting basics. And at the end of today's tutorial we'll have an image like this where we're looking, you see on the left I have a little outline, looking again at the sun, looking at these sphere lights for these recessed can lights, or what are also called point lights. We have a rectangular light creating this soffit and also lighting up this wall. And as a bonus, we have this emissive material or self-illuminated objects, because objects can also be lights. And as a bonus, we're looking at render region, fillet edge, and depth of field. So you see the depth of field is set to focus on this glowing box, and then the image becomes blurry as it moves a certain distance away from the light box. Okay, before we jump into the tutorial, just want to remind you, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do. Click on subscribe, click on the little bell, and choose all the notifications. My goal is to make it to 6,000 subscribers, getting pretty close. If you missed the V-Ray for Rhino Basics video, make sure you go back and take a look at that video. There'll also be a link to it at the end of this one. Also connect with me on Instagram. See what I'm up to with my students. See what my latest videos are. Would love to connect with you there at my first name Alfonso, my last name Peluso, Alfonso_Peluso. My goal is to get to 2,000 followers. Okay, let's jump right into this. Okay, so first place to start is what are we looking at? What's our base rendering? So I'm going to go ahead and open up V-Ray, and I'm going to go to settings, and under settings I'm going to look at render output. So the last time that I rendered it, it was at 1280 pixels by 720 pixels. Little high for a test rendering, not super high for a final rendering. So I want to just save myself some time by lowering that resolution. I'm going to lower it down to 600. And then I'm going to take a look at what the rendering looks like. Now, there are two types of renders. There's the teapot for the production renderer, and then there's the interactive renderer. So I just want to get a baseline rendering. I'm going to choose the production renderer. Okay, so we're seeing what we have. We just have a sunlight, and at the end it did a denoiser, so it got rid of the graininess, it got rid of the noise, the speckles. So that is turned on. And if I go over, if I expand this tab or panel to the right, I'm going to see that my denoiser is on, and I have it set at the moment just to a default denoiser. Okay, so starting with the sun, I'm going to close this V-Ray asset window and the V-Ray frame buffer. So I'm using a Rhino sun, so if I type in the command, excuse me, if I type in the command sun, I'm going to get a sun pop-up window. Now, when you're working in V-Ray and Rhino, it's a little glitchy in terms of sometimes you can't get to these floating windows without pressing on the Rhino back window. So what I found very helpful is to just dock some of these windows that you're using. So I'm going to take the sun and I'm going to dock it over here. Excuse me. I shouldn't have ate that granola bar before I recorded this video. Oh, you ever eat one of those crunchy granola bars and it leaves more of a mess behind than you expect? More of a mess than goes in your mouth. Okay, so let's look at this sun. So to look at the sun, I want to look at an interactive rendering. Now I don't always have to open up the V-Ray asset window. I can go here. I also have my teapots. I have the production renderer, and I have the interactive renderer. So I'm going to click on the interactive render. Okay, and while this is up, I can in real time I can move this sun around, and I can see that happening in real time. I can raise it or lower it. Okay, so I have that ability. Okay, now there's also more to it. There's more to the sun. And to look at the more to it, I need to open up the V-Ray Asset Editor. And in the V-Ray Asset Editor, I'm just going to call it the V-Ray window. So in the V-Ray window, I do have a Lights tab, and there is my sun. So what can I do with the sun? Well, I'm going to expand this panel out and see what I have here. So I have some options here, and in that previous video we looked at some more of the options than we're going to look at now. At the moment I just want to look at the intensity of that sun. So by default it's set to 1. 0 is going to be black and 1 is the default. I can go higher than 1. I can go to 5, let's say. I can go even higher if need be. So just wanting to let you know. Also, it's not just 0 or 1. Let's say I want 0.5, so I have that kind of adjustment as well. Okay, I'm going to leave that at 1. The other real important factor in lighting is the exposure value. So if I go to settings, I'm going to go down under camera, and you see I have an exposure value. To the left is higher values and darker image. To the right is lower exposure and lighter values. So we're going to focus on some more interior lighting today. So we have the sun, and so we're going to keep it relatively dark for now. Okay, we'll start there. Okay, I'm going to stop this rendering. Okay, just a couple notes. So when you're working in V-Ray for Rhino, you want to save often. So you don't see it, but I'm Control S on my keyboard or File Save. I do a lot of that because it's gonna crash. At some point it's gonna crash and you want to be saving your file. Okay, so we're gonna start now by putting in these sphere lights. So if I bring back up this image, what I'm looking to do now is put in these lights, these circular lights, these recessed can lights. And what I need to do, what's important with this, is I need to make a pocket in the ceiling. So we're going to go ahead and make that pocket. Okay, I'm going to go to a top view, and I'll go over to my layers, and I'm going to make this layer 4. I'm going to call this light pocket. I'm going to make it current. Okay, and I have my grid snap on now, and I'm going to make a circle with a diameter of 6 inches to represent one of these recessed cans. So I'm going to type in the command circle, snap to that point. Diameter has been set to 6. If it's not 6 for you, that's not the default. I'm going to type in 6, enter, and there is my recessed can. Now I'm going to make a lighting pattern that you saw in that image where I just take this and I copy it. I'm going to use a center snap. Center's good. I'm going to take off end for a moment so I don't have to zoom in, and I'm just copying this 5 feet apart. So that one's over 5. This one is going to be over 5. I can take all of these and copy them up 5. and down 5. Okay, so that's my lighting scheme for those recessed cans. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to extrude those and then Boolean difference them from the ceiling. Now if I look at this in perspective, those lights are down at the bottom, or I should say top of floor, and I want them to be at the bottom of the ceiling. So I'm going to right click on light pocket, choose select objects, and I'm going to copy those from the top of this floor. So I need an endpoint snap back on. I'm going to turn my center off from the top of the floor to the bottom of the ceiling. Okay, now I'm realizing I just copied them. I didn't need to copy, I just needed to move them. Let's get rid of the original. Okay. Alright, so those are there. I just want to make sure that they're actually at the bottom of the ceiling. So hard to tell, but if I right click on light pocket and I choose select objects, there I can see that they're not below the ceiling. Little yellow line there, so they're in the right place. I am going to extrude those, so extrude curve, and I'm going to extrude them up half the distance into the ceiling. The ceiling is 6 inches, so I'm going to make this 3-inch extrusion. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract them from the ceiling. So I'm going to do this in perspective. Let's stay in perspective. So I'm going to use Boolean difference, select surfaces or poly surfaces to subtract from. That's the ceiling. Select surfaces or poly surfaces to subtract with. That's going to be all those light pockets. So I'm going to right click on the light pockets, select objects. It says delete input yes, means it's going to delete those extrusions. Okay, so now I have my openings in the ceiling, my recess can openings to place some lights into that. Okay, saving, Control S. Okay, so now I need to place the lights in the V-Ray lights. So I'm going to make a layer. I'm going to make this layer. I'm going to call it. Now, it's probably a good idea to make a layer for each type of light. I'm going to make one layer today and put all the lights on it. Okay, so that's my lights layer. Okay, so I'm going to go to a top view, and from this V-Ray toolbar, I'm going to click on the down arrow. This is the lights. This is where the lights are hidden. So I'm going to click on the down arrow for that, and I'm going to choose a sphere light. It's also known as a point light. So I'm going to select that, and I'm going to place it right in the center of this light that's in the center of the space. So I'm going to click on center. I'm going to uncheck end. Alright, and I'll zoom in. And I'm just, so what's happening is I'm going to make it the size of the light, the 6 inches. I'm going to make it the 6 inches. I can type 6 inches here. I can turn my quad snap back on and snap to the quad. So that's a light that's 6 inches. Now, what does that look like in a front view? So in a front view, it's right at the top of that light pocket. So I need to move this down. It's important that I select this. So that's the point light. That's what Rhino sees it as, a point light. It's important that I select it, type in move, and I'm going to move this down. Okay, so I'm holding my shift key because I don't want it to move around on me. So I want it to go straight down. My grid snap is also on, so I'll take that off. So I'm holding my shift key, or if ortho is on, it's going to move straight down. So it's moving straight down, but I also don't want it to move back or forth in 3D space, so back away from me or forward toward me. So while I have this going straight down, I press the tab key once, and that's going to keep it in perspective. It's going to keep it right where it was. I just lowered it down. So in a front view, you see. Okay, so now I'm not going to go ahead. One mistake I see people make, especially students, is they'll put all the lights in, and then if there's a problem, it's a lot more challenging to troubleshoot. So I have one light. I want to make sure that one light is working properly. Okay, so let's take a look at it in the camera view, and Control S to save this. and I'm going to bring out my interactive rendering. Take a look at that. All right, so not much light is emitting. We definitely have something there, but not too much. So we need to look at the settings for this. Now, one of the bonus topics that I was going to cover and look at is render region. So right now I'm only concerned with seeing this light. Is it bright enough? Does it look like a light that's in a recessed pocket? So I'm going to choose render region. And when I choose render region, I'm just using my mouse to draw a region. And now it's only going to render that region when things change. So this saves you a whole lot of time as well. So let's bring up the V-Ray window. Here is my sphere light. Okay, if I open the tab to the right, what I have here is a picture of what a sphere light is and how in this image you'll see it lights on all sides. So a sphere, the light emits from all direction. Now it's interesting that the default setting is 30. The maximum default setting is 30. And you would think, well, I can't slide that number any higher than 30. Well, you can. If you click in there and if I type in 100, it changes this number slider, so it becomes more dynamic. So now you can see a preview of that in the V-Ray window, but you can also see it in the frame buffer. Now, there is a size. Now, I drew it at 6, so there is a size, and you can see this thing getting bigger. And by default, this point light, it's actually a sphere. Like, you can actually see the sphere is visible. And recessed cans don't look like that. So under options, I'm going to make that invisible. Now, it looks funny because it's bigger because I moved that size. So I got to keep that size the exact size of the pocket. So I'm going to make that 6. Okay, so that looks decent. Now that looks decent, I can copy that light to the other location. So you always want to do that first. Make sure the light looks good and then go ahead and copy it. Always make sure you stop this interactive rendering if you're going to do things like copy or just going back to Rhino. You want to make sure you stop it. Okay, let's go to a top view. I'm going to take that light and I'm going to copy it around. I'm going to just have my center snap on. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that to each of those locations. Hopefully it's not moving around in the Z direction. We'll find out. Okay, let's take a look at that in perspective. Oh, those stayed put. Perfect. So there's all of those lights. So now if we go to our interactive render, now it's still only lighting that one, or it's still only rendering that one part, but also I'm not in my cam view. So I got to go back to my camera view. I'm going to turn off the render region. Okay, let this update here. Okay, let's try that. Stop it. So if that's the thing with the interactive rendering window, no matter if you change the viewport after the interactive rendering is started, it's still only going to interactive render that viewport that it started in. So that's why when I changed the cam view, it kept rendering just the perspective view. So after I stop it and I click render last, it's rendering the correct view. So those are the can lights. Okay, I'm going to stop that. So next I want to look at a rectangular light, and eventually this rectangular light, I want to use it in this soffit area, but when I first look at this or introduce it to you, I am just going to use it quite simply to light up this wall on the right hand side. Okay, so I am going to do this. If I go to my top view, so I want it to shine on to this right wall. So when I draw it, I want to look at this from a left view. If this is my origin, this is the left side, so I want to look at a left view, and then my light will be pointing to the right when I make it. I don't have a left view set up, but if I go to front, I can go to this pull down and I can go to set view and I can change that to left. Okay, so this is where I'm going to make my rectangular light. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that down arrow for the light. I'm going to choose rectangle. That's my rectangle light tool. I'm going to turn my grid snap on, and I'm going to make it as big as these windows. So with the rectangle light, what it wants you to do is it wants you to make the first edge, and then it makes the rectangle. Okay, if I look at this in a top view, there's a little arrow that's pointing to the right. So I can select this object, rectangular light. My gumball is on at the bottom of my screen, and I can move this. I'm just moving it closer to the wall. Okay, so let's go back to our camera view, Control S, let's save. All right, so what does it look like in the rendering? So let's start the interactive renderer. Okay, so there there it is. You see a little plane. And if I move it forward more to the right, I'm going to see the back side of it, which is going to be black. Let's get this set up. Let's make this happen. All right, yeah, so I'm turn off my grid snap and my O snap. Okay, so yeah, I'm seeing the back of it. And if I move it to the left, if I move this out of the way, I'm going to see the front of it. So it's visible, just like the sphere light was visible. So let's bring the V-Ray window back up. Okay, so it automatically puts me in this rectangle light. It's showing me an image of what the rectangle light looks like. It's now it has the sphere light didn't have a directionality setting, and that you can find right here of 0. But as I change the direction of this, now it's a little different in the two windows. So in the rendering window right now, it's only shining forward. It's not shining up or down, above or below. It's just making that light shine directly forward with that directionality at 1. If I put it back to 0, it's going to shine in 3 directions with a rectangle light. It's not going to shine behind. It's going to shine forward, above, and below. And that's what we're seeing in this image also. It also has an intensity, so we can raise and lower that intensity. You can go above 100, of course, by just typing in here. So, if you need more light, don't be afraid to type in brighter values. Okay. Now, it also has an option under options to make it invisible. Okay, so now you don't see where that light source is coming from. Okay, I'm going to move it closer to the wall here. Let's move this out of the way. Okay. All right, so next thing I want to make is look at a soffit light, which is really what I want to use the rectangle light. I just introduced it to you quickly in that method, but I want to make a soffit. So that soffit is going to look, it's going to look like this. Okay, so back, I just need something in Rhino. I actually need a soffit object. So let's see, this is my left view. I'm going to model this. If I go back to my top view, I'm going to model this by drawing just basically a box at this location where my cursor is, and then that box is going to be 20 feet long. So I want to look at this. If this is my origin here, I want to look at this in a front view. So I'm going to change my left view. I'm going to change that to front. Okay, and I'm going to make a layer. This new layer, I'm going to call it soffit, and I'm going to make it current. And I'm going to go ahead and draw a box. Okay, so at the moment, I'm not going to snap to anything. I'm just going to type in the command box, because I can always change the size of this box. So I'm making a box, and it wants it says width, but it's really the depth or the length in this case. So I'm going to type in 20 feet. Okay, so now in 3D, in my perspective view, there's that box, okay? Now it extruded 20 feet in the wrong direction, but that's okay. So I'm going to take it and just use my snaps to move this into place. So I'm going to turn on my object snaps. I just need an endpoint snap. I'm going to put this right now just temporarily right there, and in a front view you see where that is at. Let's go back to perspective, and I'm going to move that down. Okay, so I have that in line. Now I'm just going to use my gumballs on the bottom right. I'm just going to use my gumball and lower this down. Now it's coming away from the wall a little bit too far, further than I would like it to. So I love this. This should have been in the bonus. Solid point on. One of my favorite commands, solid point on. It gives me points that I can move in different directions, and I can make it even thinner if I wanted to. Okay, so we'll see how that works. Let's look at that in a cam view. So yeah, that looks fine. There's our soffit. So now I want a rectangle light above it that shines up on the ceiling. Now I'm curious if that soffit is blocking this rectangle light from showing up on the ceiling. So I'm just going to bring out the interactive. Okay, yeah, it's lighting up the bottom of that soffit, but now there's a shadow. So I want to actually put the soffit light in there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off that rectangle light to begin with. So I'm going to go to the V-Ray window, and to turn off a light, there's always, once you open the tab, so for rectangle light, once I open that tab to the right, there's always a little slider button that turns it on and off. Okay, so it's off now, and we can put in our rectangle light for the soffit. So we're going to do that in a top view. Okay, I just need a rectangle that's in this area where I made my soffit. So I'm going to, rectangle light is the default right now. I'm not going to snap. I'm going to turn off my object snaps, and I'm just going to draw a rectangle. So it wants the edge first. Now I want to make this on the lights layer. Just got to be conscious of that. Okay, so it wants my edge first, and then the width. Okay, so where is it right now? It's down. Okay, so you notice that the arrow of that light, yeah, we talked about that with this light too. There's the arrow, that's the direction. This is the direction of this light. It's pointing downward. I want that to point upward, so I'm just going to select it, and with my gumball, there's the little rotation icon here. So if I click on this, I click on the little rotation icon, I can type in 180 to rotate that 180 degrees. So now you see that arrow is pointing up, and I can drag this down. Okay, so let's go back to our camera view. Control S to save. Let's see what we have here. Start an interactive render. Alright, so now we're getting that soffit light. That looks really good. Alright, the last few things that we want to do, stop this interactive rendering. What I want to do is I want to make this glowing box. Alright, so we're going to make a box, we're going to fill it all the edges, and then we're going to make it glow with an emissive material. Alright, let's go for it. Let's do this in a top view. I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to call this glowing box. Okay, I'll make that the current layer. Okay, so I'm just going to use the command box, not snapping to anything, just drawing a box. Now it wants the width. It's actually the height in this case. I'm just going to make it 2 feet, and I'll take a look at this in the camera view. Alright, so there's my box. I'll move it away a little bit. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to isolate this box. So I'm going to select it, type in invert, that selects everything else, and I'm going to type in hide. Alright, there's my box. I'm going to change my view to shaded. Remember, I'm keeping it wireframe just to reduce the amount of memory the computer has to store when I'm making renderings. Okay, so I'm going to make this I'm going to make this have nice soft edges. So I'm going to use something called fillet edge. So I'm going to select the box. I'm going to type in the command fillet edge. It says select edges to fillet, but before I do that, I have to have some foresight and I have to change the radius first. Okay, so the radius that I want this to be, I'm going to say 6-inch fillet radius. So I'm going to change next radius to 6, and then I'm going to select edges to fillet, and I'm selecting everything. So I'm just making a window that selects everything. Hit enter a couple times. There's my nice filleted box. All right, so I'm going to type in show to unhide everything that I made. Change this back to wireframe. Okay, so what does it look like? There it is. Now, it's nice to see in the rendering an object with some curvature. There's just something nice about the shadow. We're starting to get under it, and but that's going to disappear pretty quickly when we make this glow, but that's okay. So let's stop this. So how do I make this emissive? So the idea is that objects can become lights. You don't always have to rely on a rectangle or a sphere. You can turn anything, any geometry, Rhino geometry, into a light, and you do that through the emissive material. So I'm going to open up, I'm going to save it, open up the V-Ray window. I'm going to go to materials. I'm going to right click on the material and choose emissive. Okay, so you see it's this glowing white object or glowing white material. All right, so let's leave the default. Let's right click on it and say apply to layer, and that's going to go on the glowing box layer. And let's do some interactive rendering with this. So I can click on the interactive render. All right, so that's, you see that. You see how wonderful that is, that it's glowing. Okay, so what can you do with that? Well, you saw in the preview image that I did change the color. Before I do that, I do have an intensity, so 0 is off, 10 is all the way up. There's also, let's bring this back down. Now, I could be saving time by using a render region, but I just want to kind of see how this light starts to emit onto the other surfaces. There is a transparency, so if I want to see into the box, I can start to do that. Now, this is a little tricky because if it's too bright, I'm not seeing into the box. Okay, so there's a balance. There's a balance between intensity and transparency, so something to keep in mind. Okay, so color. Right now the color of this is white. If I change that color, I'm going to go ahead and make it a little brighter. Alright, so I'm going to make it less transparent. And more intense. Alright, that looks pretty nice actually. Alright, one last thing I want to cover is the depth of field. Remember, I want to focus on the glowing box and then blur the rest of the image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this interactive render. I'm going to try to keep it running. I'm going to try to keep that running, and I'm going to go under settings, and there is a depth of field. Let me close this window. Okay, there's a depth of field that I'm going to turn on. Okay, and it's right away it's showing me some options. Hard to really see what's going on at this resolution at the 600, but let's just talk about it a little bit. So a couple things. There's a defocus, there's a fixed distance, and then you can adjust this focus distance. So if I crank up this defocus, crank it up even more. Alright, so the focus seems to be in the middle of the image. So I want to make the focus on this actual object. So I'm going to click on pick point. So there's other options below here. There's camera point and there's fixed point. So if I choose fixed point, now I am going to set that fixed point by picking a point in Rhino. I'm going to try to snap to something. Let me turn on my O snap. Snap to something on the box. Doesn't have to be right in the center. So I'm going to pick this point to snap to. Alright, so now you see we're getting focus on that box. And it's really blurry right now. So if I take the defocus down. So it's really up to you. You have to experiment on how much of this depth of field. But depth of field, it really adds realism to the images. And a good high quality cameras will give you the depth of field. On the iPhone, you have some options on the iPhone to do that when you're taking a picture. So what is it? I'm trying to think of what that's called. Oh, it's gonna come to me. What is it called when you take a picture? It is portrait mode. Portrait mode is somewhat similar to doing this, where it focuses on an object and it blurs the outside of it. Okay, so how do we want to render this out? We want to increase the resolution of this. So for my render output, I'm not going to go too high. I'm going to go 1200. I didn't want to interactive render that, so I'm stopping that. Okay, so 1200, and I'm going to remember you need to, the interactive render is always going to be grainy, noisy. You have to do a production render. So get that going. Alright, so that's all I wanted to cover in this video. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm continuing this V-Ray series, so let me know what types of things you'd like me to cover in V-Ray, and please subscribe, and I will see you during the next video.